everyone, and welcome to CBank Network. We're so glad to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have the sponsored webinar from Effectiv, and it is Leveraging Data Insights with AI, Stop Fraud and Protect Accounts. And our presenter is Ritesh Arora.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. I'm going to keep my webcam off because I have a limited bandwidth. I was supposed to be back in the US because of some weather issues. I'm in a place where there isn't like a stable internet. So just to save the bandwidth so that you can hear me all right and see the content all right, I'm just going to keep my webcam off. And Kunta, thank you all enough for taking the time to come here and listen to this talk. As Jane has already mentioned, the focus of the talk is going to be how we can leverage actionable data insights utilizing AI and machine learning to be able to prevent fraud and also help solve some of the financial crime issues that we are seeing. Before we go deep into that, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Ritesh, one of the co-founders of the company Effectiv. We started Effectiv more than 16 months ago, and since then we have gone live with multiple banks and customers. Prior to working with Effectiv, I have spent more than 12 years working as a data scientist, reviewer. I have led multiple data science teams, have worked with companies which have gotten acquired by the likes of Walmart and PayPal. And in both of the previous companies, I was leading the data science groups, one of the first data scientists to grow the teams to 50 to 60 different data scientists distributed across geographies. In my last role, I was working actively with Fortune 500 banks to set up their fraud and KYC platforms and helping them enable some of the cutting edge machine learning and AI to be able to solve fraud and KYC problems, specifically related to financial crime and how to continue to reduce false positives, how to continue to identify the patterns that are harder to detect, and setting up the systems and making sure those systems are stable. With my co-founders, when we started Effectiv 16 months ago, we had one goal, and the goal was how do we continue to make technology such that it is affordable and still actionable and doesn't require an army of people to be able to leverage that technology. With that goal, we built the platform. For the first 9 months, we spoke to more than 200 different people in the market, data scientists, fraud fighters, reviewers, investigators, star filers, across the spectrum from fraud and compliance, and understood what their challenges are, what are they not able to scale, and what are some of the machine learning capabilities that they see utilizing as an enablement tool, not as a replacement. So with that insight, I'm gonna add a quick disclaimer here. In this presentation, I'm not gonna give the insights as if there is some sort of a panacea that I can give to the folks, and then everyone can use those insights to be able to go fight fraud. In this webinar, I'll focus on how to structure the systems, what I have learned over the period of last 12 years by working with some of the biggest banks and fintechs and fastest growing companies in the world, and how at each stage different challenges that we have faced and how we surpass those challenges by building better systems. And once we build better systems, it's very easy to drive any actionable insight that we want to drive once the goal is clear and once the system is in place. So there isn't going to be an insight that I'm going to tell or I'm going to put here in the slide that is going to be good for everyone. What I'm going to spend time on focusing on how we can establish the system and how we should be establishing the system, and what we have learned while doing some of these things in the last 12, 13 years to be able to get to the point where we want to go. And before going there, I'll quickly highlight some of the broader agenda topics. I'll cover very brief intro of AI, where AI started from, how it came into the financial industry, and where it is today, and what the last 10 years have done to the technology, and how the acceleration of technology, both from the consumer side and from the backend services side, have led to leaps of utilization, leaps of advancement in the technology to be able to utilize for real game-changing fight that we have to do for the fraudsters. Because the technology that we have fraudsters also have access to that technology. It's technology is cheap. How you leverage is where the importance of AI comes into the picture. Then I'll focus some of my time in establishing some of the things that have changed the landscape of fraud and financial crime, like why and where we are struggling as fraud partners, both as organizations, as people who are building technology like Effectiv, and our peers of other companies and our customers in other banks and financial institutions. What are some of theirs? How the landscape has changed. Then I will also cover very broadly why it's not an option for us to not consider AI as one of the primary fighting tools and how it would lead us to stay behind if we don't use this tool to the best of its ability. Then I'll also touch very briefly on where AI can plug in and how that can be plugged in. Then I'll also cover very briefly on what AI is and what it is not. There's a lot of noise around AI. AI is going to take the jobs. AI is going to do this. AI is going to replace human beings. By being in this field where it wasn't even a field, established field in the last 15 years, it has grown to be one of the most actively researched, looked into, and published field today. But 15 years ago, no one was talking about it. Everyone was like data science. Yep, we'll see. We don't know. None of that was. No one was worried about AI taking job. By being in this field, I can guarantee you AI is not here to take the job, and I'm going to touch very briefly on that, how human and AI can work together, and then what are some of the key leverages that AI and ML can provide to the financial institutions. And then I'll dive deep into where within the fraud ecosystem it is extremely helpful and how specifically it can help increase operational efficiencies. As I said before, for us to go further out into what and where AI is today, we need to understand where AI has come from, how some of the people and pioneers within the field have tested some of the methodologies and improved over a decade and multiple decades to be able to get to where it is today. In 1980s, there were very few people even talking about neural network-based systems. There wasn't even the computing power there to be able to test some of these systems. Even if it was there in the hands of some of the biggest institutions that were heavily funded by government institutions to be able to utilize some of those capabilities purely for research purposes. And this is how typically the evolution of technology is, especially for the technology that is early on is considered to be a public good technology. Government provides a lot of funds to a lot of research institutes. They do a lot of research to understand how the technology can move forward. And as the technology becomes cheaper and cheaper to afford, then private companies and other organizations step in and make it available and scalable for rest of the organization, for rest of the ecosystem. Similarly, AI has also followed that trend from 1980s to 2010, where over a period of multiple decades, government and other private institutions have worked collaboratively to be able to come up with newer and newer methods to test and do more increasingly sophisticated tests on top of him. We hear technology beating chess player, technology beating AlphaGo player, but those technologies take millions and millions of dollars to develop and years worth of effort to be able to fine tune so that they can just serve one single purpose, and that is to beat the best human in the game. But while we see the headlines, what we don't see what that underlying technology is doing on the other side, how it is enabling us to stop spam, how it is enabling us to stop bots, how is it is enabling us to identify patterns that is near impossible for human beings to even detect, because human beings have a particular limitation on how many number of variables that they can look into and detect the pattern. That's where, while we see AlphaGo player getting beaten, chess getting beaten, similar on a parallel track, similar technology in the last 30, 40 years have been utilized, for example, to make better credit card models, to make better fraud models, to make better unsupervised model to be able to detect wide network level pattern detection that has allowed financial institutions to fight this battle, which has gone bigger and bigger. A quick anecdote: when I started my career in fraud detection in 2010, it was a $5 billion problem. And I, in my own ignorant self, at that point of time, I was like, oh, $5 billion problem will probably take like a decade or two to solve it, and then we'll see what happens. And since then, in 2022, it's 20 plus billion-dollar fraud problem in the United States alone. We were losing $5 billion in 2010 and 11. Now we are losing $20 billion, and we are spending 4x of that money, $80 billion more money, to be able to keep the losses to under 20 billion. So it has not gone anywhere. If it, anything, it has multiplied by 4. And if anything, it has gotten increasingly more complex to fight because technology is cheap, and what access we have to the technology, fraudsters have to. Now, I want to debunk that myth that AI is here to replace the human beings, and I think the 2020s will have a true picture of where AI and human beings would need to work together to be able to have this fight taken to the next step. AI without humans is nothing. Humans without AI can do a lot of things, but when we bring AI into the picture, we have some of the most powerful tools at the disposal of human beings to be able to fight the fight that is in front of us, which is getting increasingly bigger. So in this talk, I'll focus some of my times where they are also like where AI and human can collaboratively work together. In the next 10 years, in my research that I've done with other companies and in my other co-workers, what are some of the tools that we need to be able to build to be able to drive the insight that needs to be able to that we need to be able to fight the fight that we have. Because if probably we cannot make fraud to zero, I think that would be an impossible target. But how do we fight it more effectively and more efficiently? And I think human beings have a vast role to play in it. And AI will be a tool for enablement for us to be able to fight that fight. So what has changed in fraud and financial crime landscape? We are all spending a lot of time on our phones, on our computers. Very rarely in last 2.5 years. Anyways, it's in front of us. It's not a surprise. There were no banks. There were no branches. We didn't have any place to go. And I don't want to keep saying the same thing that you've heard 50 times before too. Like, we are living in an increasingly dynamic and digital world. Everything that we are doing is at our fingertips, on our phone, on our laptops. Bad actors, good actors, there's very thin line now. And the incentive to do something bad is also constantly in front of us. Fraudsters are bombarding people. Just yesterday, there was an article published that new dope is fraud. The biggest focus of some of the gangsters in a lot of big cities is now stealing identities, creating stolen identities, because they don't even have to leave their homes. They don't even have to be in a particular place. They can be operating from a van, stealing information, and for all we know, we have no clue these are the good people or the bad people, because it's technology has made it so simple for them. And finding bad actors has become increasingly more complex. And what has happened in the past 20-30 years, because of our own biases, both as human beings and also both as fraud fighters, we are extremely analytical, extremely critical people. We like looking into the details. A lot of our analysis and tools that we built on top of it have focused on after the fact analysis, making sure what we are tagging, what we are putting into the system is 100% fraud. Because if we don't find 100% fraud, how are we going to find more fraud if we put a policy into the system? So this after the fact analysis has gotten so deep into the tooling and the technology of fraud fighting that we have to unpeel that onion and actually create systems that don't only rely on after the fact analysis, because they barely look into the historical pattern. Forget about looking into what could be potentially wrong with what is happening right now in the system. What is that is unknown will always be unknown if we only focus on after the fact analysis. A lot of the tools, when we talk to industry experts, when we go talk to our prospects and customers, they're like, yeah, we go back into the system, we download the transaction, or look into 200 or 300 alerts that are generated every day, and then we look into those alerts or generate case or don't generate a case. Great, we need that. The technology has gone so far out where fraudsters are using far more advanced and sophisticated technology that purely relying on after the fact analysis, looking into what has happened and not looking into what is happening right now and what could potentially be happening is making us fall behind the fraudster. And that's why the numbers are where they are. Approximately 5% of gross revenue is being lost. That's just not me saying this number. This is Association of Certified Fraud Examiners publishing these numbers. And it's fraudsters are using the same tool. I've said it multiple times already. In one of the instances, I would tell you, we were testing this new tool which does identity verification. What fraudsters did, they took a driver's license, cut the eyes of the driver license, and just put random eyes on the driver's license to fool the system. The ID verification system couldn't detect what fraudsters had done. Since it couldn't say that it's an absolutely clean driver's license, it put it in a review queue. It couldn't detect such a simple trick that fraudsters did with utilizing some of the sophisticated photoshopping AI technique to merge the eyes that they painted on the stolen identity card. They just had one driver's license and they were just putting different faces on top of a driver license with a simple program that you can download online. And AI system, while very sophisticated, could detect that something is wrong, but it couldn't detect what is exactly wrong in that. So that's where I want to highlight, while AI is great, AI is moving ahead, the same exact tool that we have, fraudsters have. So in order to beat them at their game, we need to use the same tool. They're not doing after the fact analysis. They are always looking for what are the newer ways I can spoof the information. I can steal information and repurpose the information. Can I go from one institution to another institution to another institution? Where can I find the link where it is broken and I can go into the system once, because their biggest challenge is getting into the system. Once they are into the system, once they have gotten an application, then they can apply for more loans, they can apply for more credit cards. So this landscape has changed so drastically, like staying behind is not an option for us. Going further, Jane, we have a quick question here. I'll take a pause here.
Perfect. Thank you. So our polling question that's relevant to the material today is: we struggle to meet fraud targets for new products, channel offerings. So the possibilities are strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And we invite everyone to participate in this poll if you're out there watching. It does count for CPE credits, but it also helps us to gauge where everyone sits in the audience. So I will leave this open an additional 20 seconds or until we have 100% participation, whichever comes first. And thank you all for voting so quickly. We're almost at 100%. And right now it's looking like we'll probably come in around 7% strongly agree, 59% agree, 34% disagree, and nobody strongly disagrees. Oh, it just changed. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share those results. So 9% strongly agree, 58% agree, 33% disagree, and 0% strongly disagree. So I'm going to go ahead and close that.
Cool. Thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone for answering this simple question. This helps us learn too where the industry is moving, where our counterparts who are actually working with the people in the front line are dealing with. If you're struggling to meet your fraud targets, then we as fraud fighters, we are as people who are building technology need to learn from that and do something different so that you're all not struggling, and build the technology so that we can enable you to be able to fight the battle that is increasingly getting harder to fight. Without spending a lot of time here, I'm going to quickly move on to my next slide. As we were mentioning in the previous, as I was mentioning on the previous slide, the landscape has changed quite drastically. Fraudsters have the same tool at their disposal that we have. Customers have changed, customers' expectations have changed so drastically in the last 10 years that everyone wants everything, including me. I want to send money right now in the next 3 minutes across countries from India to US, US to India, and I don't want to. I would guess a lot of people are in the same boat. I want to create an account. I like the stuff that I want to buy. I want to use BNPL. I want to do everything right now because that's also being fed to me. It's not only that I am changing my behavior, industry is changing as consumers are demanding, and as industry is changing, consumers are changing their demands too. With that, as we speak to banks and financial institutions and credit unions, one of the biggest challenges that I continue to hear is I'm just inundated with such a high number of alerts. Every time I open a new channel, we just started a new Zelle offering, and I'm just inundated with 200 to 300 to 600 alerts in a single day. I just cannot deal with it, and vast majority of it can be automated, but we don't have the technology. Same is with real-time payments. Then, if you have 300, 400 alerts, and out of which only 3 to 4 cases are being filed, it means there's a high number of false positives. So how do we decrease false positives? And as we have this such interconnected world, people are doing transactions everywhere and anywhere at any given point of time. It's not going to go down. The number of transactions, the number of new accounts, everything is going to go up. It's only a matter of time. If you look into this article, Wall Street Journal just recently published, like literally, I would say less than like barely 10 days old article. It's only a matter of time that perpetual KYC will become a requirement from FinServ. Today, we allowed someone to come on board into our system and they did hit sanction, OFAC, PEP screening, politically exposed person list. They didn't hit any of those. And we started allowing their transaction. We don't know 3 months later, 6 months later, 9 months later, 12 months later, whether if the same person would have gone through the KYC process, if they would hit those. But regulators expect us to know that. If today I'm not a part of a PEP screening list, I'm not part of a sanction list, I'm not part of the OFAC, but 3 months later I am, regulators and compliance folks expect us to know that. But how do we know that if we are not continuously to check? But if we continue to check at every transaction, we are doing re-KYC, that becomes an insurmountable problem because same number of alerts that you are getting at the time when you are onboarding new customer, you'll get same number of alert at every transaction. One, it would create a bad user experience. Second, it would create so many more alerts that hiring for just for the people to look into that alert would be a challenge. Even if you manage to hire, training those people will become increasingly bigger challenge. So we don't have an option anymore to not leverage AI for what its true capabilities are, which is, I'm going to talk about that. But before that, I'll also talk about what is AI and what is not, which is how to automate stuff that is repetitive, how to automate stuff that is manual, and continue to provide more and more time to our human beings to be able to identify things that needs to be identified where deeper investigation needs to happen. AI's cognitive abilities are still way far behind the cognitive tasks that humans can do that no other machine can do. But then there are so many manual repetitive tasks that can be automated and that can continue to be improved and in a continuous manner that we shouldn't be staying behind and we shouldn't be thinking, oh, should I invest in AI? 64% of the financial institution in the last 2 years who have invested in AI have seen at least 10 to 20% benefit in their operational efficiencies. They have been able to either cut down the time it takes to look into a case, or they have been able to manage more cases with the same number of people. The numbers speak for themselves when people invest in the right technology, when people invest in building the systems the way it should be building, then the opportunities to improve the existing system or reduce the fraud are endless. Like I cannot quote the name of the company, but it's one of the biggest company in the world. In the US, they have the most amount of retail locations. I'm not gonna name it, but when I went there for the first time after my previous company got acquired, I was talking to someone in the e-commerce division, and they're like, hey, it takes us like 5 to 6 weeks once we get the chargebacks to be able to put a policy in system to be able to stop something like that happened 5 to 6 weeks ago. Can you build us a machine learning model that can do it sooner? I was like, ideally, it shouldn't take you 5 to 6 weeks. If you've gotten a chargeback today, you should be able to learn from the chargeback today. If you have thousands of chargeback coming every other month, every other week, you should be able to learn from those chargeback and create a model or a simple rule that can go in production in no matter of time. Like, no, but it takes us 5 to 6 weeks. So we started peeling the onion, like, okay, where are the problems? Like, how are you receiving the chargebacks? Oh, we get the file from this system, this system, this system, that system. Then we wait for a cohort of the transaction. When all of the chargebacks are received, we combine them all together in Excel. Okay, so once you've received one part of the chargeback, you're waiting for the last part of the chargeback. And that process can take anywhere from a week to 3 weeks time. So you're already losing 3 weeks to be able to combine all of the chargeback. And then what happens? Then we format all of the chargeback in same simple format to be able to download in a format that some human being can look into it. So that's like additional 3 4 days worth of it. So you see where I'm going with this. The problem was not that they didn't have ML. Problem was that some of the tasks could have been automated. Some of the inefficiencies could have been automated way before an ML model needed to be kicked in. But once you establish that system, it went down from 5 to 6 weeks to less than 3 hours for them to reconcile all of their chargebacks in one single place and then trigger a learning task from a machine learning model to be able to spit out a model that would tell you if this rule or policy goes into the system, this would be an effective benefit. Literally 3/4 of the time quickly just shaved out by just understanding where the manual effort is being spent. Because AI and ML is not only about just building a fancy model and somehow it will, no, it needs a lot of different things to happen before to be able to leverage it to its true potential. And I'll talk about that also. I'm sorry, in my next few slides. But before we go further, what is the truth or reality of AI? Like, is it panacea for everything? Can we just put a system in place and it can take care of the things? I hope at least in the last 24 minutes that I have spoken, I have at least made my point clear that I don't believe AI is a panacea, that I and a lot of people in my position, I'm not just speaking from my experience, at least in the industry for the last 12 to 15 years, AI is used as a tool to be able to enable other human beings to do their jobs more effectively, and human beings are indispensable. Having set the stage, what is the truth about AI? The more data is better. That's just one truth about AI. There's a new subfield that is being researched right now. Some of the pioneers of AI researchers, machine learning researchers, they are, it's a new subfield. It's not being used practically in real world right now, but they are trying to figure out what is the minimum amount of data that we need to be able to get the same amount of value. Given the fact, if I have an option to take 100 rows of data or 100,000 rows, can I get to a point where I drive the same amount of value, whether I use 100 or 100,000 rows? The implications of that subfield of research are enormous, but we don't know how far we are to be able to utilize it. Andrew Ng, one of the professors in Stanford, one of the first course that he launched in machine learning in Stanford, is one of the most popular course ever in machine learning. Everyone in machine learning loves taking that course, even if they know all of that, because Andrew Ng is just a figure. He's spearheading that research as part of his investment fund. Is basically low data requirement for AI and machine, because AI is an extremely data heavy problem. So we'll continue to operate with that hypothesis that more data is better until research tells us in next 1 year to next 20 years that you can get the same value with less data. But we are not there yet. So I'm going to continue to use this hypothesis as one of my facts. More data is better. But then not all AI is same. With so much more data that we will gather, what kind of AI will be utilized to be able to solve fraud is different than what kind of AI will be utilized to be able to drive an autonomous vehicle. Even at the level of how data is structured is different. How data is stored is different. How frequently data needs to be stored. What kind of feature computation that needs to happen. How frequently that feature computation needs to happen. And what kind of algorithms can be used and done on top of those features is very different. When we hear, yeah, autonomous vehicles are so far out, AI is so far out, we are still struggling with stopping fraud. Yes, because we are talking about two separate domains, two separate ways of collecting data, two separate ways in which people interact with the system in which we collect the data. Because if people are interacting with system in one particular way, you cannot collect the data which is absolutely different. For autonomous vehicle, it's a time series data as an example. Like it's not simple tabular format, rows and columns. Every row is a timestamp, and each timestamp we collect thousands to a million different data points. Those could be anything. But in fraud world, the way we collect data is it has rows and columns because this is the proven way in fraud to be able to stop fraud. There are other ways like a lot of deep learning and machine learning model can also be utilized to detect suspicious behavior, to detect anomalous behavior, but purely to detect fraud, we have a very separate sub branch of AI that is useful. And it's not like we can just plug in any model that is available open source because Google launched a model or DPI launched a model or Facebook launched a model, and that will somehow magically fit in the fraud domain and solve our fraud problem or financial crime problem. I want to establish that also one of the core truth or belief you can call for at least me and the practitioners of the data scientists that I have worked with in the last 15 years. And there are at least 300 to 400 data scientists that I've worked with, managed, or interacted with in my life as part of working with other companies. And the last one is AI is better with human. Without human, there is no AI. I have seen it multiple times. My peers have seen it multiple times. And once you the autonomous vehicle AI that we see, also someone is actually sitting and tagging the incidences. Okay, that is a pole, that is a flag, that is a stop sign. AI is nothing without human beings because at the end of the day, they are trying to mimic what human beings are doing. Who is better than humans to tell what human beings are doing? And it's no one. So AI is trying to learn. Right? So this is another core principles that we need to operate with. AI is better with human, and how it is better, I'll also talk about it. But before we go into the details of how human beings and AI can work together in conjunction and what are the different modalities that they can work together, I want to bring the context back into the financial institution and banks, like where all we have the checkpoints where customers interact with the system and where the opportunities are. I'm sorry. Once I establish these ground rules, more data is better. Not all AI is same, and AI is better with human. Makes my life easier to be able to explain why we need the system that work 24/7, that collect a lot of data, that collect data about each and every event that happens, interaction that happens with the customer, whether it's they're calling the customer service, whether they are changing the password, whether they are changing their account information, whether they are downloading a statement, they are sending money, all the way from when they're asking to be able to allow to create an account. Because first point of the time when someone is coming and knocking at that door, I need an account or a loan, some sort of financial instrument, either a buy now, pay later product, whatever it is which would eventually lead to a money movement event. That is the first event when we have the information about someone who's asking us to be part of a financial institution, which means broader financial world, right? At that point of time, also, we have the least amount of information in the hands of the institute who is onboarding that customer, unless they're an existing customer or a member. Since we have the least amount of information, what do we need to do? We need to collect the information that we are collecting anyways as part of our account creation, but then we need to go out in the system and ask for the networks. Is this email trustworthy? Is this SSN trustworthy? Is this address that customer is saying is their address trustworthy? Is the IP address that customer is asking me to create this account from is hidden behind a Tor or a VPN? Is the device which is coming from is trustworthy? Has this device seen previous malicious transaction? All of these information that is not part of your database, you need to go get out and collect that information as part of the network that has potentially seen this customer at some point in time. Then, as they are working with you, they are doing payments, they are doing transaction, they are changing their password, they are asking for you to change my login details. You need to start collecting those data points, because that's how you start building profile of your customers, your members, to understand how they interact with you. First is when they're asking for an account to be created, how they interact with the rest of the world, and what information they are telling you, whether that's trustworthy or not. That's the first one. Second, once you have understood, okay, I can relatively trust this entity, whether it's a business or a person. Now, when they come to me and ask me to do something, can I trust that? Because then you need to start giving. Then at the time of money movement, anyways, we have our regulatory and compliance requirement that we have to do. We have to do anyway. So across from the day one when they become your customer, all the way till they have an existing relationship with you as a member or a customer, we need to start building system that can start collecting this information first, so that AI, when it's the data is ready, when the data is collected, enough data is collected, as we establish the truth, more data, better it is, more good data, more good insights. It's just the simple plain truth of AI. More data is better, more good data, more good insights. It's just simple, but more good data is only possible when we have a lot. Not all data will be useful at all. That's another thing that I didn't want to put there, make it very critical. But you might be asking this question, okay, I keep collecting this data, but how do I know where it is useful, where it's not useful? That's the point. First point of the AI is we need to start collecting this data, and every time customer interact with us, we need an ability to be able to collect this data. And then I tell you where the system needs to go to be able to start leveraging insights. As I've just mentioned, account origination, account monitoring, and money movement. A lot of things here would make a lot of sense to you. Verify persons at the account origination. At the time new businesses, you are giving business loans, business credit card, you need to verify businesses as part of who are the business owners. If it's a sole proprietorship, if it's a brand new business, it's very little information out there. What are you going to do? Right? But without collecting data, we don't have an ability. At the time of loan application, at the time of card application, we have so many entities to look into, which means we have to collect all of this data. Once we pass someone, and every time they log in, we need to collect that information. We need to monitor password change. Once the money movement starts happening, for example, it's ACH, wire, Zelle, RTP, or check, like how do you even know I deposited a check to you and it's a fake check, or it's a check that's already been deposited to fifth bank that is not even part of the ecosystem? Like it's a brand new neobank, like they don't have a lot of ability to check, they don't have a lot of real-time system, but I knew I went and deposited the check to them and they gave me my money back, but you did not know because that institute did not have information. But if you don't collect, if you don't tap into the network, then how would you even know if this check is trustworthy or not? Similarly, like any other money movement account. So once we start establishing this system and these data start connecting to each other, here is my person who came at the time of onboarding. Here is what they ask. This is how they interact with me, and this is what they do with their money. Then we can start creating networks. We can start adding more and more data points for each customer, each member, and their profile. We can start creating insights like in the last 7 days, how many times this customer has changed password, how many times this customer has sent money more than $1,000 to the same person, how many times this customer has used the same device, same IP address, same email address in the last 30 days to be able to send money more than $500. Once we start collecting these data points and start connecting these dots in a network manner, we can start creating these comprehensive data structures about our customers and their behavior and their interaction in terms of data sets. And then we need to think about how to connect the financial events and non-financial events, because there is a very high correlation between a bad financial event happening today and a indicator non-financial event happening before. What does that mean? What do I mean by that? It means if I send a fraudulent transaction today, there is a very high likelihood that there was a non-financial event before. Either it was a login or a stolen credential or adding off a financial instrument or deleting off a financial instrument. Some non-financial event would almost always precede a fraudulent financial event. But if we are not connecting the dots and creating matrices on top of these financial and non-financial connected events, then we have no ability to observe. And if we don't have that ability to observe, we cannot detect what has changed. The goal of machine learning and AI is to detect change. And sometimes that change is good, and a lot of time that change is bad. And once we have an ability to collect and observe, then we can very quickly pinpoint where is it the bad change, where is it the good change. And once we detect the bad change, then we can give a lot of information to our reviewers, investigators to be able to go and say, yes, actually this change that you thought was bad is actually really bad, and let's not allow this change. And let's learn from it. And next time something like that happens, just stop it automatically. That's where AI comes into it. I'm sorry, my throat is not well. I'm gonna cough a little bit. I hope you are still with me. Having said that, there is a quick question coming up. Jane, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So here we go. We struggle to automate repetitive / manual steps in current compliance processes. Strongly agree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And thank y'all for voting so quickly. We have almost 70% of the vote in. So I'll leave this open for a bit longer and give everyone a chance to vote. If you're here for those CPE credits, please do be voting, because you do need to vote in 3 polling questions and stay on for the full duration of the webinar, which is 1 hour in length. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and it looks like we are landing at 15% strongly agree, 55% agree, and 30% disagree. Nobody strongly disagrees. So I'll go ahead and hide those results. All yours.
You can still see my screen, right? Okay, I take that as a yes. Thank you everyone for answering the question. And now we are coming to how human beings and AI can work together from where it is today. Like people just mentioned, for example, 15% strongly agree that we struggle to automate repetitive manual steps, and 55%. So basically we are saying 70% of the people agree or strongly agree that there is a struggle or a challenge to automate repetitive manual steps in the current compliance process, the fraud detection process, while 30% disagree. And I would love to talk and understand and learn something and guide our product development initiative with that too. But for the folks, for the 70% folks, this is the stuff that I was talking about. Like where we are at today, like I was mentioning, we do a lot of after-the-fact analysis. We look into a lot of alerts, just yesterday I was giving a demo to one of our prospects, and they're like, "We just enable cell, and there are 200 extroverts every single day, and I have 3 people." That's in addition to 500 alerts that we were looking from another system that we were with. And it's hard to scale. I cannot scale, and if I push my people, the error rate goes up, and it's only a matter of time and the system will fall. So how do we go from minimally AI-driven tasks to a system where humans and AI can work in conjunction? And what are some of those tasks where human beings need to be very actively involved as part of the loop? And then where AI can do most of the stuff by itself and human beings can come step in on top of the loop. So going from minimally AI-driven tasks to tasks which are mostly automated with AI in the loop or on the loop, we need to first understand what is the kind of task that we are dealing with, what is the scale of the task, how much leverage that we can gain by investing in this technology, because there's also always a question of ROI. If I spend $1 million or $500,000 or $100,000 in this technology, what do I stand to gain? Do I decrease my false positive? Can I onboard my customers better? Can I create more frictionless experience? There's always that question, like I need to understand also what is my potential ROI, which is always tied to how big is the problem, how much urgency there is to be able to solve that problem, and what would it look like once it's mostly automated or minimally automated or automated with human in the loop or on the loop. So as you see, if you go from left to the right, there are tasks like new account originations. When we have the least amount of information at hands about the person or the business or the entity that is asking to be the part of the network, we need strong human judgment. But that doesn't mean we need to look into vast majority of the applications, vast majority of the entities. These are the tasks where the quick rule of thumb is if we have less information at hand, we need more human intervention. If we have more information at hand, we need less human intervention. That's a quick rule of thumb to understand where human beings need to be very actively involved and where human beings can just check it out, see if the system is working, and if not, can guide them on their direction. And I have given 2 different examples here. As I have set the stage previously in my previous slide, control, collect, observe, detect. First, we need a system to be able to collect the data that can tie different pieces of information together to create comprehensive profiles about our customers and members, profile not in a negative way, profile in a way that creates their interactions, learn from those interactions and create variables and features and data on top of it that can allow these AI systems to be able to learn from. What they learn is what is usual and what is unusual. For example, suddenly you see an IP address bombarding for 500 applications in a matter of a week. And that has never happened in the past. That's very, 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 very easy for an AI system. Because what AI would do in the past, it would look at all of the IP addresses. It will create features for this IP address in last 7 days, how many new accounts are added? 1, 3, 5, 7, 4, 7, 10, 20, maybe 100, but never 500. So as AI is collecting these data, it's also learning what is usual, what is unusual. And suddenly something like in a week's time from the same IP address, from the same device, we suddenly see 500 applications. It will be like, boom, alert, look into this IP address. So these are the kind of tasks where things are easily understood, things are at a point where we have the least amount of information, need actual human intervention. And one example is new account origination. But on the other hand side that I just mentioned as an account of IP address detection, suspicious activity detection on a device level, something happening at a point which can also be leveraged as part of the network, that is mostly automatable in a sense. Like I just mentioned, that IP address suddenly gets 500 new applications or 500 new login events in a matter of few minutes on the same account. It means This is something that can be automated. Why? Because it has never happened in the past, and we have the evidence of that in the system. In our system, we see a lot of IP addresses every day. We see a lot of IP addresses logging in. We see a lot of IP addresses doing new applications, typically one-to-one. Same human being coming from same IP address shouldn't be filing more than one or two applications every month or every week. Ideally, not like that should be a single low digit number. Suddenly, an IP address starts seeing a lot of traffic. We have that information in our system, whether it is about that customer or not, because this is not disjointed from the customer. And these are the two ways where human can be part of the AI loop, where the information, for example, synthetic ID, we don't have that information in our system. If we have that information, it's easy. We will never allow it. If we don't know if this ID is synthetic or not, if other institutions have seen that or not, there we need to go get information from the system. We use some sophisticated AI to detect if eyes have changed, if name looks like the marking on the driver license or the passport is right or not. Some OCR technology we need to use. And then if we are still not able to validate, go get a third-party data and understand if this SSN or the driver license is linked to a fake address, or SSN is linked to a deceased entity, or driver license has been linked to other potentially 5 fraud instances in other 5 institutes. That's where we will need human being to be more actively. But without setting the system in a way where we can collect information at each interaction, or at least most of the interaction, and then finding a way to connect them, a lot of these AI processes are not going to be able to leverage. They will be able to leverage a lot of data from the system, but it's extremely more powerful when we connect the data in a way that it creates these profiles about customers. Don't get me wrong, that AI is not useful if we don't have data about customer in our system. AI is still extremely powerful, but that would be powerful in a different manner to be able to give you network level insights, but not customer level insight. Because to be able to get customer level insight, we need to create customer level data. And that's why the need of collecting the data at each and every customer interaction is extremely important, because that creates the data for AI to learn about that customer. And the more you do it, more frictionless journeys you can create for your customers. And when that happens, what happens? We have a lot of internal efficiencies, we have a lot of external efficiencies. When human beings and AI work together, what happens? A lot of manual and repetitive tasks that were being happening, that was happening before. Someone didn't enter the phone number correctly. Someone had to go resubmit their application by correcting the form. That is a simple task that can be repeated, that can be automated. Then on the other hand side, the complex task is this device combination with IP address and a combination of SSN and a combination of time of the day and the day of the week is extremely suspicious. That's not very much possible for human beings to detect at scale. That's where AI comes into the picture. Once AI starts collecting these features and start learning from these features, a lot of the low-hanging fruit of declining bad stuff gets automatically declined. What it means, it leaves our human beings, reviewers, frontline fraud fighters with way more time to do quality investigation. Once they have time to do more quality investigation, which means fewer cases, fewer alerts, their quality of the tagging, quality of fraud improves automatically. Once that quality improves, AI becomes automatically better. So it's a I'm losing the term from my head. It's like a self-reading mechanism. Once you take care of the lower hanging fruit, automate with machine learning, our reviewers, frontline fraud fighters, compliance investigators, SAR filers have more time to look into the less number of reviews, which means their quality improves, their decision making improves, their cognitive load decreases, which means every time they say it's a fraud, there's a very high likelihood that it's actually fraud and it's actually really suspicious activity. False positives are down, which means what you are feeding back into the system is also improving the system by itself. So it's like a self-feeding mechanism. And once this happens, what happens? We get another Another capability where now AI can start looking into the systems which humans cannot look in, because not all of the rules and policies and procedures will always be put into the place. We will not we will not have the 100% population into one single financial institution to know this is 100% fraud. There will always be list fraud, but the goal is to keep that list fraud to the lowest. Goal is to keep false positive to the minimum. But what happens after a certain point, once our system has achieved a certain efficacy, machine learning system can go and look into other collected data, other collected entities, and start looking into the data size of hundreds of thousands of rows and hundreds of thousands of columns and see where are the patterns standing out, what is usual and what is unusual, without having human beings to tag it. And that's where unsupervised model comes into what they do without without human beings looking into anything. The value looks like for the last 6 months worth of transactions from this particular area, this behavior is suspicious. This is anomalous. It stands 6 standard deviation or 60 standard deviation away from my mean, as a simple example. This could be as simple as a statistical measure. This could be extremely sophisticated machine learning model learning on top of the time series data for thousands of feature and telling you this is suspicious, very accurate. Right? When an autonomous vehicle takes a quick left turn because it sees a bump, it's not because it has learned in real time this is a bump that it needs to avoid. No, because they have fed hundreds of thousands of millions of events to that autonomous algorithm with that bump and train them when you see a bump, you need to go swift left or the right movement. And while doing so, you need to see with your thousands of cameras and radar sensors. Similarly, we get that ability once we start creating a lot of these data about our customer. They give this AI algorithms an ability to now look into vast amount of data like a big machine and see where it needs to go left and where it needs to go right as an analogy. But without collecting data, we never get there. So the first part of the AI is to improve, to get internal efficiencies boost, more time for our cognitively investigative tasks, more supervised model because our reviewers, fraud fighters, investigators have more time to do more accurate value, more accurate reports, more accurate case studies. Then AI can feed into itself. But once we have reached to a bit of a plateau of our internal efficiency gains, I haven't yet met an institution where they have reached a plateau. But once we have gone to a point where a lot of internal efficiencies boost have been leveraged, then AI can start leveraging other part of the ecosystem, which I just mentioned, like looking into the data that you have never looked into, that you never get the time to look into, and then run algorithms on top of it and tell you what are these potential rules that you can put into the system and what would be a potential benefit of it, and quickly do a bit analysis and put it into our system. Overall, human without AI would still be great at doing what they are doing, but AI without humans is next to nothing. But when they work together, our quality of the system improves and error goes down. They just work in opposite direction. That's the ground rule that we all know. And I have mentioned all of these points multiple times. Fraudsters, they fight. They are now 24 by 7, 365 days. They don't sleep while we want to sleep. So how do we leverage technology in a way that allows us to sleep, not only sleep, but sleep too? Sleep with the mind, sleep with the feeling that systems will work in our favor, and if something fishy will happen, something suspicious will happen, it will flag it, and in the morning or in the evening, I can go and look into it because I don't have 200 to look into, I have 20, because other 180, my AI and machine learning has already taken care of it. Similarly, same people, if they are making better decisions, what you are feeding your system is an ability to be able to continue to improve, which means your lower operational costs. In initial investment into the technology would feel more, but as you start leveraging this technology over a period of 6 months, 12 months, 15 months, your cost benefit analysis data would speak for itself. Almost every institution that I worked with in the past, whoever has invested in the sophisticated AI and machine learning is always coming back in 6 to 12 months' time. They're like, we wish we would have invested that money sooner rather than later. Understandably, that to get the value out of AI system within the first 30 days is extremely hard because it's a data intensive problem, as I've just established now. But in the fraud scheme, you need more data. More data means more good data. More good data means more good insights. AI without data is nothing. But how do we enable human beings to improve that data, which is where the good data comes into the system? We need to provide them more time. All of these, what I'm mentioning here, I'm not going to talk one-on-one here because we've been talking about this throughout this last 56 minutes that I've been talking. With that said, this is our last question.
Thank you. So I am mindful of the time. I will go through this question quickly. Please do voting quickly if you are here for those CPE credits. So the question is, we struggle to detect and stop fraud in real time. Strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So I'll leave this open for a tad longer. It looks like we have 90% of the vote in. So thank you for voting quickly. If you are here for those credits, please do be voting. And it looks like we are going to land at 13% strongly agree, 64% agree, 23% disagree, and 0% strongly disagree. So I'll go ahead and close that poll and share those results. And all yours.
Perfect. Thank you, Jane. All right. And with that said, a shameless plug for Effectiv. We do AI and ML-driven solutions to fight fraud and financial crime. As I was mentioning throughout the last 55 minutes, our core thesis is not to say AI is a panacea for everything, but to make sure we build systems in a way that it allows our frontline fraud fighters, financial crime fighters to do their job better, more effectively, in a more cost-efficient manner. With that said, our three core tenets are: how do we enable our financial institution to protect accounts and their customers' information? How do we drive more automation? And how do we reduce the cost to acquire new customers and members? With that, we have built a system that comes with out of the box solution that you can use to stop fraud modalities out of the box. But then it allows fully customizable solutions with very simple to use UI for you to be able to go write your own rules, write your own policy. But if you don't have that tech and fraud expertise in-house, we have a dedicated fraud and solutions team that work with you throughout this journey, make you comfortable if you want to manage it by yourself or manage it on your own. We don't manage the queues, but we make sure insights and the systems that are put into place are incrementally providing you the value to be able to fight fraud more effectively and continue to reduce the fraud and make it a safer and more beautiful and amazing experience for our customers to be able to interact with our financial institutions. Having said that, that concludes my webinar today. Thanks a lot, everyone. I really appreciate all your time and answering the questions. If any questions, I can take it now, or you can always reach out to me either on this email or Ritesh@effectiv.ai.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ritesh. So I'm going to go and put it back on my hold screen. And for those of you who would like to hear more from Effectiv directly, I'm launching a poll, and if you want to opt in, we will share your information and they can reach out to you. So I will leave that open for a little bit. And with that, we will go ahead, and if you have any questions, please do put those into the questions box. And oh, you got a big thank you. Yes, he is such a good sport because I don't know if you can tell, but he's not feeling well. So So it's not easy to do a webinar when you're feeling under the weather. So you got a big thank you for this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And with that, I would like to just thank you all for joining us today. That was our sponsored webinar from Effectiv, Leveraging Data Insights with AI, Stop Fraud and Protect Accounts with Ritesh Arora. So I hope you all have a wonderful day and that we see you at future CBank events. Bye, everyone.